Hi, I'm David Broadbent, and welcome to episode 2 of the Chaddy Enders. First of all, a big thank you for tuning in. Brilliant to launch last week with the legend that is Andy Ritchie, and thank you to everyone that watched or listened or downloaded that episode. A big thank you to our 3 sponsors, without whom I would very much struggle to do this. Firstly, to Wayne and the team at AC Tyres. Thank you very much to you guys for your support. So they are based just on Cross Street, and they have been friends of the club for a very, very long time. A lot of players and staff get their car needs sorted by Wayne and his team there. He's a big fan of the club, and thank you to Wayne, also a big supporter of local projects. So cheers, Wayne and AC Tyres. Also, Eden Creative in Royton. Again, Rick and his team at Eden Creative, big supporters of the club over the years. Lifelong Latics fan. Done some brilliant design work for the club over the course of the years as well. Also, our third sponsor, new one for this week, NFL Weekends. Brilliant concept of trips to America for long weekends to watch NFL games, but not just that, the whole experience of it, the whole the tailgate, the parties beforehand, all the food and the bar crawls afterwards. And James, who runs NFL Weekends, also a big Latics fan. So thank you all 3 of you for your support. It is greatly appreciated. Now moving on to episode 2, and today's special guest, well, he wasn't a player and he wasn't a manager, but he does play a very significant part in the club's history, as he did spend a brief period as owner. He was also my boss for on a couple of occasions throughout our careers, and it is fantastic to be able to welcome him. Thank you very much for joining us. Today's guest is Sean Jarvis. Sean, fantastic to have you with us, and thank you for taking the time to join us. As you said earlier on Twitter, never played a game for the club, never scored a goal for the club, but actually in the 6 years you were with us, a pretty important role with one thing and another, which we will get onto. But initially, how are you, and what are you up to these days?
Yeah, do you know, Brody, I'm absolutely honoured and delighted to be asked to be on your podcast. I still look out for Latics results every week and see how we're getting on. And yeah, I've still got a very, very soft spot for the club I once owned. At the minute, however, I'm back to my roots. I'm back here in Leicester. I'm now the chief exec of Leicestershire County Cricket Club. I've been doing that for best part of 7 months now. So my very first season, we didn't do too bad. We didn't finish bottom of the championship, but we got to the quarterfinals of the T20. So year 1, I'm quite pleased with. But I put pressure on our manager now, Paul Nixon. I've given him some targets for the 2021 season, so he's got his work cut out. But I've spent a little bit with him on players, recruiting some players. So and I'm just in the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to announce one of our overseas players that's going to come and join us. So yeah, it's good. It's back to my roots, back home, and trying to do what I can for the very first club that I visited when my dad brought me here, really.
Oh, excellent. So I guess cricket, starting a job in the middle of a global pandemic, especially a high-profile job, that must have been fairly difficult to start with.
Yeah, do you know, I left Huddersfield Town probably around the February time, and then the pandemic started in March. But it's bizarre, really, because the pandemic has given us here at Leicestershire the opportunity to press the reset button. There are a lot of problems at the club that we had, and what we've done is use the time wisely, really, to try and work out, you know, what is our DNA, who are we as a club, what do we stand for, what can we improve on, and I think we've done that. You know, we're in quarter 1 of the new year, and we're performing well. We're 34% ahead of budget. I'm happy with the recruitment. I'm happy with the players, the fitness that they're going through at the moment. So we've used the time wisely, and I think that's all you can do, really, to get yourself ready for the season ahead. And I've got high hopes for us. We might take us a a few years for us to really challenge on the trophy front. But if we can go one further than we did in the T20 last year, then who knows? We might upset a few people.
Oh, happy days. Well, you can certainly take the knowledge from Huddersfield in terms of upsetting other clubs and perhaps overachieving a little bit. So that'd be all good. But what I want to do now, Sean, is I want to take you back 21 years now. You joined. I know it feels like when I put it that way, that sounds horrible. So we'll just say I'll rephrase that. We're going to take you back to the year 2000.
That's better.
That sounds better. At least it's this millennium. When you joined Latics, so take us back. How did you come to join Latics?
Yeah, wow. God, you're taking me right back now. I used to work in advertising in Leeds, which back in those late 80s, 90s was big industry, big books. You know, there were some big accounts there. But I always had a passion for the sport. It was what I always wanted to do. And I did do a bit of work with the Premier League, a lot of with the sponsors. I worked with Bass as well, and in the changing of rugby league from winter to summer sport. So I had some good sports background, some sports business background, and the opportunity to go and work at Latics came up. So I applied. I sent my CV in there and had an interview with the board, as it was back then, which, if memory served me right, was Alan Hardy, David Briley, Derek Taylor, Ian Stott were some of the names that kind of interviewed me, and lo and behold, I got the job. And so I came in as marketing manager at the time, and I loved it. Do you know what? The 6 years, which I'm sure we'll talk about, was it was hard work, it was hard graft, it was real hand to mouth stuff, but I was so pleased to get the job. I actually, at the same time, in the same week, I did get offered a job through Halifax Building Society that were paying me double what Latics were offering me. I remember saying, it goes without saying, doesn't it? But I remember saying to my missus that, what shall I do here? Shall I go and work for Halifax Building Society? You'd be well paid. Or should I follow my dream? And she said, follow your dream. She said, she was happy to support me. And that was it. I made my mind up. So I accepted the job, and I loved it. There were some really tough times, some brilliant people, some great characters. To this day, I'm incredibly passionate about Latics, and I want them to do well. And to this day, I would do anything I could. If people asked me, I'd help them as much as I could. And it still has a very special place in my heart. So
you get the job. What are your first impressions when you walk into that building, the first 9 o'clock on your first morning? What are your first impressions of the club?
Yeah, shit, have I done the right thing? I remember walking down the tunnel, and I was greeted by Alan, and he kind of gave me a guided tour, met the staff, and it didn't really matter. I was so determined to do everything I could, to use the knowledge that I picked up through all the sports background, that I wanted Latics to win the Premier League. We were in League One at the time when I joined, but I was prepared. I just came to that job to just give everything, and I leave nothing behind. Like players, I always like players, when they cross the white line, they leave nothing behind. I was no different. As an employee of the club, my job was to leave nothing behind. And I say that to this day, and I say it to the staff here, is that when you walk out of the office and go home, I want you to look back at the door and think, have you given everything to move the club forward? And if you can answer that question, yes, every day, I can't ask anything more of you. But if you are going home and thinking, I could have given more, this job's not right for you. And that's always been my mantra. And that's what I wanted at Latics. And to this day, I can still hold my head up high that every day I worked at that club, I gave it everything. And, and I like to think my time there is I did my little bit for Latics. That even during the dark days, I gave it everything that I possibly could.
So, in terms of the some of the people that were knocking around when you first started, you mentioned Alan Hardy. So, Alan had been there. Judith had been there in the ticket office. Big Gordy had been there. I think Neil started a couple of years before you. So, people that kind of had a lot of knowledge of the club and some real characters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you name all the names there, like Judith and Leslie in the kit room as well. Then we had Neil, who I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. Neil and I had a big role to play. Alan, love him or loathe him, but yeah, Alan was there. It was a character and part of the fabric of Latics. Big Gordy, one of the most genuine, nicest blokes you ever likely to meet, and my relationship with Gordy was very special. I love that bloke. We had some great times arguing, and I think the podcast might have actually played a little clip of one of my favourite moments. That was Scott Vernon scoring against Man City, right?
Yeah, Scott Vernon. Yeah, the 2005 FA Cup.
Do you know who the commentators were on that clip?
Go on.
Gordon and me.
Well,
listen to that clip.
Funnily enough, I did my first ever commentary with you at an away game at Peterborough.
There you go. So yeah, that Man City one was we recorded that in the office. We watched the game back and recorded over it, so we knew the score, we knew everything was going to happen, and we recorded it for the video, which was brilliant. But blimey, what a character, and such a loss for Latics. I was incredibly proud of him when he got the secretarial job, and if nothing else, he got to that level. And that boy knew all the tricks of the trade. But what a character, what a gent. Latics through and through. He was a brilliant character. Not so necessarily good at typos in programmes, because we used to have running battles. I said, Gordon, the bloody typos, but he'd always have an answer. But what a character, yeah. Sadly missed, and I always get a Christmas card from Lorraine every year, his partner, so brilliant times. Some of the players as well, Andy Ritchie was obviously manager at the time, Bill Hermson, Dave Cross, Tony Philliskirk, real characters of the club, really gave it all, and what a brilliant place it was to work at that time.
And you mentioned the FA Cup there. That's a little bit further forward. Before we get to that FA Cup game, there were one or two darker days, weren't there? I guess we can't really talk without touching on Chris Moore and his spell of ownership at the club. I guess before it got to the stage that it got to, we were doing very well on the pitch that season. Under Ian Dowie, we were heading towards the playoffs. Was there a point during that season where you kind of looked round and thought, we're in a bit of trouble here?
Yeah. It was a very volatile environment. Chris Moore, I remember when he joined, he was very bullish, about going to the Premier League and this, that, and the other, very determined. And I've seen it. I've seen it in so many owners of football clubs that say the same thing, that actually, it takes at least a year, 2 years to really understand the dynamics of football club, the communities of club. But Chris Moore came in, and you know what? He put money in. He put money. He backed the manager, Ian Dowie at the time. Signed some great players: Fitz Hall, Chris Armstrong, Wayne Andrews, some Neil Kilkenny, some terrific players in the mix at that time. And Latics had a good side, and could have got promoted. could have got promoted. But it kind of went a bit. You could sense that it was fragile, and Chris Moore, as are many clubs, are very much dependent on their benefactors and their businesses. And for whatever happened, Chris Moore's business kind of took a bit of a hit. The climate around that time. I think there were circumstances in his personal life that made him change his direction. I think he suspended Alan at that time, so things started to go off the rails. And his advisors, the people talking in his ear, the people that would have had his ear, maybe telling him one thing or another. So you could see it was volatile, it was fragile, and it was such a shame because Latics were a whisker away from getting into the Championship. And whether Chris Moore could have sustained that or not, I don't know. But it was such a tragedy, really, that happened. And I had differences with Ian Dowie. We had a love-hate relationship at times. But he was a great manager. Make no bones about it. He was passionate about Latics. He wanted to prove that he could be a manager, and I think he did a good job. So it was tough, but it got derailed. It got derailed, and that's when it all kind of started going wrong, and people started jumping ship, leaving left, right, and centre. Players exercising their right because they hadn't got paid. It was an awful, frightening time for everybody. And I remember I got headhunted by Manchester Evening News. They wanted me to go and work there, but I couldn't turn my back on Latics, and I'm sure we'll elaborate a bit more on kind of what happened.
Yes, quite. I mean, certainly on the pitch that season, you say under Ian Dowie, we were fantastic. We were playing some great football, and I've since interviewed Ian Dowie, who maintains that had we kept that team together, they'd have won the league with 100 points the season after. They were potentially that because it was a new team. Chris Armstrong had been there for a season, Fitzhall a season, adding the likes of Clyde Vinart during that season, Paul Murray, players like that.
Paul Murray,
I guess with the QPR playoff games, was it always at the time, I was travelling down to QPR to the second leg with, you mentioned that Chris Moore had suspended Alan Hardy. Well, I was travelling down with Alan's son. We were going down there watching it, and it was kind of known to us at that point that if we didn't get to Wembley, we were going to be in a spot of bother. And at the time, I think you'd have had I think you beamed that game back to Boundary Park as well.
That's right.
And watching it at Oldham as well. And I guess it's from that point of view to be so close to then in a space of sort of 3 or 4 months, it all being completely decimated must be horrible.
Yeah, you too. I was at Loftus Road, or South African Way, or whatever it's called now, Kane Prince Stadium, which is brilliant. I was there. I was in the boardroom with Chris Moore, and I think if memory serves me right, his girlfriend at the time. And you could see that he to a degree wanted out, but he almost wanted in as well. And you could see that his advisors around him. And I remember sort of saying, after the game, we'd been beat 1-0, and saying, we can go again, Chris. And I think he was up for it. And I wouldn't argue with Ian Dowie. I think if we'd have kept that team together, the players, Chris Armstrong, one of the best fullbacks around, he was phenomenal. Fitz, what a player. Paul Murray, unbelievable players, some superb players in that squad. You did feel that with a couple of additions, we could have blown away that league. But Moore wanted out. He wanted out. And it was a tragedy. I mean, I'll just digress slightly. I remember that period, not all games were shown on Sky TV.
No.
And and I was given the choice about having a big screen at Boundary Park, and nobody wanted it. I think it was 20 grand to have this screen put in, and it was it was one of my big calls, and one of my advice to people ever getting into the industry is sometimes you are faced with big calls, and the big calls will define you as an individual. And that probably was one of my first big calls. I remember saying to Chris, "Look, Chris, we're going to need 20 grand to have a screen put up. We've got a stand, the Rochdale Road end that can hold about 4,500 people. We charge a tenner, with quids in." And he's thinking, no, nobody's going to turn up. They're all going to tune in, this, that, and the other. And Ian Dowie was reluctant on spending 20 grand and this, that, and the other. And it was me and all the staff were all a bit nervous about it, which you can understand. So I kind of went, no, we're doing it. So we did it. And had it failed, I'm pretty sure Chris Moore would have fired me the next day anyway. But I remember on the way down phoning, I think it was, I forgot it might have been Neil who stayed up at Boundary Park, and saying, what's happening? And he says, they're queuing all the way down Sheepfoot Lane. They're just shoving tenors in our hand. And I think we probably broke all the health and safety restrictions on there. I think we had about 6,000 people in there just shoving tenors to get in to watch that game. So it was something that I commercially was incredibly proud of. And I remember saying to Chris Moore, it's packed out at Boundary Park, and he acknowledged that it was the right decision. But it was a tragedy, because I think had he continued, we would have been promoted. We would have got up. But the choice was made. I think once we got beat, the choice was made that he was going to pull out. So and then all hell broke loose that summer. Really, it was tragedy.
So you say he decides to pull out, and then the summer of hell kicks in. You're, by that point, you've been at the club for a few years by that point, and are very much a senior member of staff. How do you even start to deal with something like that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it was incredibly tough. It was incredibly tough, because what you had happening was Chris Moore was disappearing. You had the board of directors, who were all his mates, all his friends. They all kind of disappeared. They all kind of went away. So there's nobody to turn to. Alan wasn't there. So kind of, what did you do? You then look at the staff, and the staff are kind of looking at you as probably the most senior individual. What shall we do? And you kind of go, oh shit, I'm not sure. You don't know where the next pound is coming from. And I'm in dialogue with Chris Moore, saying, well, look, this is what's happening. What shall we do? And I began then to put my feelers out to everybody and anybody I knew. I mean, the staff, the fans were emailing me, and I'd approach people like the Barclay brothers, one of the wealthiest people in Britain, to sort of see Philip Green. At that time, it was, not so good now, but at that time was.
Wow, that could have been a story.
Yeah, So I'm approaching all these people to try and find out everybody and anybody I knew, to sort of see if they would be interested in taking the club. And we had all sorts of people. I couldn't begin. I don't think we got long enough for me to tell you the individuals that were approaching us. It was incredible, bizarre. I was getting phone calls at 2:00 in the morning from people in Australia, and you could tell that there were wind-up merchants, there were unscrupulous people, but you had to explore them, because you never knew. There may be one individual in there that actually goes, yeah, I'm a billionaire, I'll buy your club, or a millionaire, I'll buy your club. And I promise you, to this day, I can put a hand on my heart and say I gave it everything to find an individual who could take on the club. but nobody came forward. And I won't mention his name, but a very high-profile individual in sport and still involved in football now approached me, met me on a Sunday morning at Boundary Park, and asked me to show him the accounts, of which I did. I showed him all those and demonstrated we were about 6 million in debt, no money coming in. We didn't own the ground. You know, we were going to the wall. And his advice was, the way out of it is to spend more money to continue to increase your debt. So, like, wow, what do we do? So at that time, I then thought, well, I've got to have a parallel plan to keep this club alive, because if we didn't have this parallel plan, then the time wasters, we may not get a millionaire that came in to buy that club. We may not have one. Who knows? We might have done. We might not have done. But I had to have a parallel plan to keep the club alive. Is imperative, because you're getting pressure from the EFL to say, right, well, how are you going to survive? What is it you're doing? So Neil and I met the guys at the EFL on numerous occasions to keep them informed of our plans, the people we're talking about, we're talking to, what we're trying to do. This is how we've got to raise £500,000 to have the golden share to keep the club alive. Luckily, at that time, the administration rule had not come in. And I don't know whether we were the last club to enter into administration or a CVA to not be punished by the points. If we were, brilliant. You know, I've never really looked it up. But
so what we're saying is it's our fault then?
Probably. It was, you had to have the two plans. So one, explore the wealthy individuals, the wealthy benefactors that will come in and save the day, or have a contingency plan that should this one not happen, the contingency plan is something we could fall back on to keep Oldham Athletic alive. So the contingency plan comprised of generating as much money as we possibly could through Save a Seat, through sponsor a seat, through the Man City game where they came and helped us and we generated money, talking to wealthy individuals that I knew. So the people like Trevor Storer, God rest his soul, likewise with Ken Roseberry. So wealthy individuals within Oldham that had Oldham ties that maybe could actually put some money into the club. So, Glyn Webb, the organisation, the guys behind that were Oldham people. They were willing to put money in. Local estate agent had a bit of brass. A couple of brothers had some money that they wanted to put in. So by doing all those contingency plans, we managed to get it to about 1.5 million. So we had £500,000 for the golden share and probably about £1 million to keep the club, to pay the salaries as best we could. The backdrop is people, and I won't name the names of the players, came to me and said, look, we're not being paid. Here's a notice, 14 days. I can exercise my right to get a free transfer. And I'm like, you're an asset to me, but because I can get money for you. But no, they wanted, and I couldn't pay them a salary. There was no salaries. Chris Moore had disappeared. Now, we had the 1.5 million, but then you still had individuals that were coming forward. And we had Vidar Fostal come forward. So he came forward, great, okay. He was then taken under his wing by people like David Briley, who at the White Hart, and the story was believable. Everything he said felt like it was above board. This was a a Norwegian fella that was coming in that was going to save the club. So the contingency plan, we kind of went, right, guys, I think we're all right now. We have somebody, and everything was great. And I remember David Briley phoning me up, sort of saying, "We've done the deal. Everything is great." And what David said to me, I remember bringing a tear to my eye that night. He said, Vidar wants you to be on the board of the new Oldham Athletic. Do you know what? That's what it's about, but it was a great moment for me. Thought brilliant. And as things then started to unfold, it was all about transferring 50k to seal the deal into Oldham Athletics account by a certain time. And I remember David Briley was phoning me almost hourly. Has the money arrived? Has the money arrived? I kept running through to Neil's office and saying, Neil, has it arrived? No, it's not arrived, not arrived. And I think we set a deadline, and the money didn't come. And it was Friday, about 5 o'clock. And I think that for me was the lowest point. And that's where I was worried. I was concerned that Oldham Athletic may disappear, what happened to Bury would disappear. That was a frightening moment for me, because it transpired. It was a hoax. There was no sustenance to it. This was not going to happen. And the clock was ticking. The season was approaching, and I remember going home and thinking, God, what do I do now? So at that point, I then had to get the money from the contingency plan back on the plan. So we had that, and we had the money ring fenced from the game against the Man City and the Save Our Seats. So we had the 500,000 there, which was kind of ring fenced, ready to sort of say to the EFL, this is for the golden share. So we could get that season up and running, and we did. And I know one of my proudest moments as well. We played Brighton, didn't we? 3-1. We got beat 3-1.
We did.
First home game, and the manager escaped. His mind escapes me now. Ex-Man U player, winger, number 7, brilliant player. He was their manager, Steve Coppell. Yeah, he came up to me. Didn't need to do this. Came up to me and he said, "Well done, Sean." And I didn't know him from Adam. He said, "Well done. What you have done for this club is brilliant. Keep going." And I was like, "Wow, absolute wow!" Somebody of that caliber has said. So that was a very proud, great moment for me. But I could only keep us alive for that year with the funds that we had through the people that were willing to sort of donate. Ken Roseberry, and I know this was one of the tweets, and yeah. I want to get this story out there, because I remember being sat in the boardroom at Boundary Park, and we had all the people around the table, and there's literally me going around the table and sort of saying, "What can you contribute to this pot to make sure that Oldham Athletic it stays alive?" And you'd have a couple of brothers say, "Well, I can put 50 grand in." Companies say, "Well, I can put 25 grand in." I can do 25. I can put 15 in. So we were like totting it up. And I came to Ken Roseberry, and I won't say the figure, but Ken, I remember looking at Ken, and Ken was incredibly passionate about Latics. And he said, "You can have every penny I've got." It brings a tear to my eye now thinking about it, because the bloke was in tears in that boardroom, and he was prepared to give everything he owned, every possession he'd got, to keep that club alive. And I'm in awe to this day of that fella at that moment, what he did for Oldham Athletic. Thankfully, we didn't need it. We didn't need it because the 3 Amigos came in. So we didn't need to do that. But it was there. it was there. And that money would have only kept us alive for a year, maybe a year and a half, and then we'd have been in the shit again, and we'd have had to do what we've had to do. But those people around that table, forget me, they're the heroes. They're the heroes that kept that club alive. With the greatest respect to Blitz, Gazelle, and Corney, who did their bit, and great, and they've done their bit. Let me tell you now, Brody, they are the people that were going to keep that club alive. Corney may disagree with me, and that's fine, and we've all got our own opinions. But without those people, that club would have gone. And I played my part. I did what I could. And, Neil played his part, and the staff played their part. Gordon organised the bus to go down to Chris Moore as a protest and all that. And that was brilliant. We all played a role. But I'm proud to this day to sort of say that the club stayed alive. And we played Chef Wednesday. Shez was the manager. Ian had gone now. Ian Dowie had gone on to Crystal Palace, I think it was.
Yep.
And Shez was the manager. And we played Chef Wednesday. And that was our first point, 2-2. And to get a point at Sheffield Wednesday with John Sheridan was, to this day, is one of my proudest moments as well. I mean, you can see behind me the moment that Schindler got Huddersfield Town to the Premier League. That's a proud moment for me. But Shez getting a point at Chef Wednesday when we were dead and gone was incredibly important for us. And then in came the Corneys, Gazelles and Blitzes, and they then took over the club. They bought the club. They bought an exclusive zone. They then took over. So those people that were prepared to put the money in, they didn't need to do that. It's interesting. One thing that still sits with me was I've forgotten his surname now. Alan. He was an estate agent. He said to me, "Don't let those shares go so soon." And sadly, I didn't have the funds to keep Oldham Athletic alive. But do you know what? That still resonates in my head to this day, all these years on, that I wonder, should I have kept hold of those shares a bit longer and seen out and gone with those consortium of people to see what would have happened with Oldham Athletic? But I didn't. We had to put the club through administration, through a CVA. We had to get the debts down from 6 million down to 1.5 million, which was the right thing to do at the time. That meant it then became more an attractive proposition for the likes of the three Amigos, and they then took it on and went from there, really.
So we talked about then how you've kind of steered the club through it and all the people that helped out. It was kind of very well documented that you and Neil took the club for £1. How did you feel suddenly going from being brought in to be marketing manager, and suddenly a few months later everything we've gone through, and you then own the club? How was that for you and Neil?
Yeah, Neil struggled. Neil struggled with it. Neil found it hard work. But I needed him. I needed him alongside me because I needed a numbers man.
Well, I've got to say that I've worked with both of you and under both of you on more than one occasion, and it is fair to say you are both very different characters.
Oh, big style, yeah, with chalk and cheese. But I needed Neil there to keep me sane. And there was a point where Neil was going to jack it in, and who knows what would have happened. But and I remember writing a piece on the website, and I bet if you look back, you might be able to find it. But it talked about the emotion, the passion, and the fan base responded to that. And I don't know, you'd have to ask Neil. I hope he saw it. And they sort of said, just keep going, keep doing what you're doing, keep driving it. And we did. So we bought it for £1. We managed to wrangle it out of Chris Moore's hands, if you like. bought it for £1, £6 million in debt at that time. And I've got to say, I shit myself. I was petrified. I was absolutely petrified as to what was going to happen. But I knew all along, because of this parallel safety net we had and the people that were there, that we could keep it going for a year. We could keep that club alive for a year. And if we got relegated, we got relegated. But we were alive. We were still fighting. So I believed in the people of Oldham. I believed in what we could do as a club to keep us going. People like yourself, who were involved in the club. I believe that there was a real passion of the people that were there that would not stop us. But it was always going to be tough. But yeah, it was a scary moment, pal. And when I told my missus, she wasn't best pleased, it has to be said, because we owed £6 million, but the strategy was always to try and reduce that debt, to try and then make it more of an attractive proposition to potential benefactors that may come in, take the club on, and drive it forward. And I know the three Amigos came in. They wanted to buy Hull City. They failed to do that. I think Adam Pearson may have taken it on.
Yeah.
So they're always passionate about buying a club. And I remember lengthy conversation with them in an office, a solicitor's office in Leeds. And I told them, I poured my heart out to them to explain, what had gone on. And they then decided, they came to see the club, they then decided, I think, to pay a fee for what's called an exclusive zone, so that they could then do further due diligence to buy the club. And they then did that. They then went through the process. Because it was in administration, it was there to be bought. The administrators had control of it. It was then to be bought, which they did. They then took it on and took on the debts, and did what they could to drive the club forward. And whatever you think of the three Amigos, they did what they did. I worked for them for a year, but then my time came where I then shifted across the Pennines over the M62 there and went into Yorkshire and worked with Huddersfield Town.
And you've mentioned the Sheffield Wednesday game and getting the 2-2 there. The game for me in that period that sticks out was the last minute winner against Rushden. That was obviously a home game there, and that kind of sticks out as at that moment, I think, because it was such a late winner as well. I think there was such an outpouring of, actually, we're going to be all right at that point. It was, it was crazy. And then you mentioned the three Amigos coming in. I guess that wasn't probably the easiest thing in the world for you personally, having gone from owning the football club to then being told what to do.
Yeah, no, I was a young lad. I was wet behind the ears. I was passionate. I'm full of energy. Still have, even though I'm a bit old. I'm approaching 55. I've still got loads of energy. I didn't mind that. That wasn't an issue for me. That, I was passionate about Latics, and I did all I could. And it's funny. I always said to them, because they talked about shifting to Failsworth and all this sort of thing. And I said to them, look, give me 5 years, I'll build you a stand. Now, what's gone on has gone on. I don't know the ins and outs of that. But they never really seemed to believe me. You never really sort of had the confidence for me to do that. And I think they probably saw an angry young man in me. And to be fair, I always, to this day, I still got Simon's number, and I've texted him a couple of times and spoken to him, and and I've got no axe to grind. But it was almost I'd done as much as I could, and they wanted to do it their way, which was fine. It's absolutely fine. But then the time came for me to leave. It felt like they didn't really want to do much more with me, so they wanted to do it their way, and that was fine by me. So then I went across to work for both Huddersfield Town and Huddersfield Giants at the time. I probably gone as far as I could in the role that I was given at Latics. But do you know what? I look back and it was a magnificent 6.5, 7 years I spent there at Boundary Park. I've still got the book, 100 Images, One Ground at home, which I love, absolutely adore. To this day, sometimes I wonder whether my story with Oldham Athletic is over, whether that's finished, whether I've got unfinished business with Athletics. I do wonder that sometimes. I suspect this is my swan song. This is my last hurrah in my employed life before I hang my boots up. But it's weird. I do have a weird sense that I wonder if there's something more for me in Oldham Athletic. Sadly, all the people that I knew, I don't think work there anymore. They've all gone. So it's a whole new set of people there. But yeah, you know what? Deep down, I love the club and I'd do anything for it.
Fantastic. Now, what I want to quiz you on before we let you go, a few questions that I'm going to be asking everyone that takes part. You mentioned it earlier, so I think I might already know the answer to this. You mentioned earlier the Manchester City FA Cup win. Does that make your favourite games at Oldham?
Yeah, without question. We went to West Ham as well. I remember winning at West Ham. That was good.
I'll tell you what, if you look at that now, look at some of the players West Ham had on the pitch that night. They were only young lads then, but they had a really good team out that night.
That was a good one. Derby County, away trip at Derby County, another one was a good one, winning there. But I remember that game most vividly against Man City because the night before there'd been serious gales, big winds, and they'd blown most of the perimeter boards off the stands. And I remember coming into work and it was like, well, I'm not sure this game, there's a bit of a health. What if the boards come off? It could sever somebody's head in the Rochdale Road end, which would be Man City fans anyway. So that's all right. But it was one of them that, are we going to? Eventually, the safety officer, Pete, agreed, yeah, let's get the game on, let's do it. And Scotty Vernon scored the goal. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, it's either the 17th minute or the 37th minute. Is that right? Or I
think it was 17 rings. Yeah, I think it was.
I think it was around there. So we had to hold on. Yeah, we had to hold on for all that time. Now, I wasn't in the boardroom. I wasn't sat in the boardroom. I was sat on the main stand, the far end, where he scored. So I was sat within the crowd. And I remember biting my nails throughout the whole game, the nerves, and then to win that match against Kevin Keegan's superstars. And I'm pretty sure it was Kevin Keegan's last game in charge of Man City. Was amazing for Latics because we'd done all the hospitality packages at hotels and we'd maximised it as much as we possibly could from a commercial perspective. So to do it was unbelievable. And to this day, I look back on that game, and it is in my top 5 of matches in my career, I would say. So arguably even in the top 2. Maybe you can guess what might be the top 1, but beating Man City was pretty special.
Okay, one thing I do touch on, you work with a fair few different managers. Now, I believe one of the things you actually put on Twitter, and I can't see this having gone down that well with him, but I believe you beat John Sheridan at a crossbar challenge.
I did. I love that. That's one of my footballing claims to fame. I wasn't, people that know me, my nickname when I played football, I wasn't the quickest. I was all elbows, was the galloping tortoise. So that gives you a bit of idea of how quick I was. But I remember one day, it was with Corny, me, John Sheridan. Corny, I think, had met John Sheridan. I was in that little bit by the bar area where you come in. And Corny went, come on, let's go out on the pitch. Let's have a bit of crossbar challenge. was a big thing on Sky Sports at the time.
Yeah.
You know, that Soccer AM. So we went out and all had a couple of goes, this, that, and the other. But lo and behold, yours truly hit the crossbar first. So Corny, no problem. He weren't much. He thinks he's a footballer, but
going to say he used to take staff games very seriously. Did Simon Corny?
Yeah, he thought he was a player, but he weren't. He weren't a player. Let me tell you. But like Sheridan, who had obviously played in 2 World Cups. An unbelievable footballer, one of the best Wednesday greats, without question. To beat him at crossbar challenge, get in. That was probably the highlight of my footballing career. I hasten to add, John Sheridan didn't like it. I think he stormed off. But I got to tell you, John Sheridan, I did his beneficiary at Boundary Park, and you know what? What a truly genuine, honest fella. Love him to bits. Can drink like a fish. Truly magnificent bloke. Love him to bits. And I think he's a great manager. I really do. And it's such a shame his latter part of the career has not really have the ability to manage in the Championship or the Premier League. But what a fella he was.
So would you say then that he was probably you saw him at the back end of his playing career at the club. Would you say best player at Oldham, or you were there?
While I were there, I think I saw him at his latter end of his career. He'd stand in the centre circle, he'd ping a ball 40 yards. To be honest, he wouldn't come out the centre circle for 90 minutes. That's where he'd probably stay. But he'd let his brother Darren do all the hard work. But what a player! But for me, I've got several players that I loved. Les Pogliacomi, the keeper, what a great fella he was. I think he got 16 clean sheets on the bounce as a bit of a record. Loved him. Paul Murray, I thought Paul Murray was outstanding footballer. Likewise, Neil Kilkenny. I loved watching Neil Kilkenny. He'll like this one, Lee Croft. I enjoyed Crofty, watching Crofty play.
Not so much when you're at Huddersfield, though.
Yeah, not so good at Huddersfield. So if he's watching this, not so good. He was pretty crap at Latics. I thought he was brilliant. I love Chris Armstrong, a heart on his sleeve. And he was brilliant when you took him up to the porter cabin on stilts to give him a post-match interview. He hated it. He wouldn't say 2 words, but I loved him. What a footballer. Fitzhall, I loved him. I never saw Peter Clark at Latics, but he was always my favourite at town. So as you can see, a lot of favourite players. Love Wayne Andrews and his celebration when he used to do the bomb. Some brilliant Josh Lowe. I used to watch Josh Lowe. So some fantastic players there. But if I was to pick one who I enjoyed the most, watching the most, Paul Murray.
Nice, yeah, he's still at the club now. He's back there as looking after the academy. So
top bloke.
I've got one final question for you that was sent in through Twitter, and actually from someone that we both work with at Huddersfield, from Jonathan Wilkinson. He asked, if you had your time at Latics all over again and could change one decision you made, and only one decision, what would it be?
Oh, wow. What a question. It might be making you PA earlier, but I'm not sure about that. I think, do you know what? I think I may have answered this question earlier in saying that I would have held on to the shares.
There you go.
And there you go. So who knows what might have happened? We might have won the Premier League by now if I'd done that. But equally, we might be playing in the 8th division against Marine or somebody like that. So you never know. But I think if I could, I would have taken that advice. I think it was Alan Kirkham.
Alan Kirkham's an estate agent in Oldham, yeah.
Yeah, that's him. Alan, what a top bloke he was. He was the one that said to me, do you know what, hold on to those shares a bit longer. And I think if I could reverse one decision, that might have been it.
Fantastic. That is a brilliant place to leave it. Thank you very much for doing this, Sean. It's massively appreciated, and I think that's given an insight, a fantastic insight, particularly into the dark days of 2004. Thank you very, very much for your time, Sean.
No, I have to say, Brody, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you the best of luck with your Twitter and the podcast. I know you've got some fantastic guests that are going to come on and tell you all sorts of stories. And I'm delighted to sort of have played my part in the history of Oldham. It might be very small, played my part in the history of Oldham Athletic. And I've got to say, it has a very, very special place in my heart. So, and who knows, maybe this unfinished business, I might be back one day. You just never know. I
feel that we've left that like on an EastEnders ending now. I'm just waiting for the drum roll to kick in there, because there you go. Sean, thank you very much.
Pleasure, mate.
Thank you very much to Sean for joining us. A fascinating insight into his time at the club. I'm sure you'll agree. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors who make this possible. You can get them all on social media. On Facebook, you can find NFL Weekends, AC Tyres, and Eden Creative UK. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at the Chaddy Enders, where more information on all our sponsors is available, and also where we'll be announcing our future guests and how you can submit questions to them. If there's anything you want to know about their time at the club, we've got some great guests coming up over the course of the next few weeks, say players, managers, owners. We've got Matt Chambers coming on, who used to cover the club for the Cron for a number of years. We've also got I think it's going to be a particularly fascinating chat with Wayne Hurst, who spent a number of years as Chaddy the Owl, and he has seen some things, let me tell you. Thank you very much once again to Sean, and thank you to everyone for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.